We only invited you out of pity. My mother, Loretta laughed, clinking her champagne glass with my sister-in-law. Don't stay too long, Tiana. We have real guests coming later. My brother Marcus added with a smirk. Yeah, try not to embarrass us with that cheap suit. They thought they were breaking me. They thought I would cry or beg for their approval like I used to. Instead, I just smiled, finished my drink, and walked out. 1 week later, the locks were changed on the family cabin, the joint accounts were frozen, and when the eviction notice arrived, they finally realized who actually owned their perfect lives. If you have ever been the family scapegoat who secretly held all the cards, hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. My name is Tiana, and I am 32 years old. To the outside world specifically. My family. I am a low-level data entry clerk struggling to make rent in a bad part of Atlanta. They think I live paycheck to paycheck clipping coupons and driving a car that rattles when it goes over 40 miles per hour. They think this because I let them think it. It is a necessary shield to the IRS and the federal courts. However, I am a senior forensic accountant specializing in asset recovery. I find money that people try to hide, and I take it back. My firm handles high-profile divorces, corporate fraud, and bankruptcy restructuring. My hourly rate is higher than my brother Marcus's entire weekly paycheck, assuming he actually had a job, which he usually does not. But my family lives in a delusion of their own, making a bubble of perceived status and grandeur that I have been quietly subsidizing for 5 years. The call came at 4 p.m. on New Year's Eve. I was in my high-rise office overlooking the city, reviewing a seizure order for a 60-foot yacht when my mother's name flashed on my phone screen. I debated ignoring it. Peace is a currency I value more than gold these days, and my mother is a master of emotional debt. But curiosity, or perhaps old habits, won out, Tiana, she said, skipping the hello. We are having a celebratory dinner tonight. Marcus just closed a massive deal in real estate. Ashley is making her famous roast. You should come. I know you probably do not have plans, so just bring some ice and try to dress decent for once. The invitation was not an olive branch. It was a summons. It was a demand for an audience. My mother Loretta needs witnesses to her life. She needs someone to look down on to make herself feel taller. And since my father Bernard has been sick and beaten down by years of her control, I am the designated audience member. I sighed. Looking at my reflection in the glass of my office window, wearing a $3,000 Italian suit that my mother would assume I bought at a thrift store. Okay, Mom, I said, my voice flat. What time? 7 sharp. And park that car of yours down the street. The Hendersons next door just bought a Mercedes, and I do not want your rust bucket lowering the property value. She hung up before I could agree or decline. That is the dynamic I am, the afterthought, the burden, the stain on their perfect image. I drove my 10-year-old Honda Civic to their house in Buckhead. It is my decoy car, the one I keep just for visits like this. My Porsche stays safely parked in my gated garage behind my actual penthouse apartment. Pulling into the driveway of the house my parents barely afford, I saw the signs of their financial irresponsibility displayed like trophies. Marcus's leased BMW was parked crookedly in the front, and a new Range Rover that I knew Ashley drove was blocking the garage. My stomach tightened, not from fear, but from the anticipation of the performance I was about to endure. I knew the numbers. I knew they were 3 months behind on the mortgage. I knew Marcus had drained my father's retirement fund to pay for that BMW lease. I knew, because I am the one who anonymously bought their debt from the bank 6 months ago to stop the foreclosure process. They are living in my house, they just do not know it yet. I walked up the steps, hearing laughter inside. The sound was shrill and performative. I paused before ringing the bell, taking a deep breath of the cold winter air, trying to steel myself. Through the heavy oak door, I heard Ashley's voice. She has a way of speaking that sounds sweet but cuts deep. I really hope she does not come in looking like a mess, Ashley was saying loud enough for the neighbors to hear. I mean, I know she struggles, but does she have to look so destitute? It makes us look bad. And that hair? Marcus laughed. Relax, babe. Mom only invited her, so we look like a charitable Christian family. She will not stay long. We just need her to sign those papers for Dad's care, and then she can go back to her little apartment. My hand froze on the doorknob. They needed me to sign papers. That was the real reason. Not dinner, not family. My father Bernard had been declining health-wise, and I had been fighting for power of attorney to ensure he got his medication. Loretta and Marcus had been blocking me, claiming they knew what was best. What was best usually involved spending his medical stipend on designer clothes. I pushed the door open, stepping into the foyer. The warmth of the house hit me, smelling of expensive perfume and roasting meat. Ashley was standing in the foyer wearing a shimmering gold dress that cost more than my mother's mortgage payment. She didn't say hello. Instead, she looked me up and down with a sneer that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh good, you are here," Ashley said, her voice dripping with dismissal. She shrugged off her heavy white fur coat and thrust it toward me without even looking at my face, as if I were a coat rack. "Hang this up for me, would you? The help is off for the holiday, and I do not want it getting wrinkled." She turned back to the mirror, adjusting her hair completely, dismissing my presence. My hand caught the heavy fur automatically, a reflex born of years of servitude in this house. The disrespect was so casual, so practiced. It was a microaggression wrapped in a family gathering. Ashley always did this, treating me like an employee, like the hired help. Because to her, a black woman who wasn't draped in logos must be serving those who were. "I am not the help, Ashley," I said, my voice calm but firm. I threw the coat onto the bench beside the door, not bothering to hang it. She gasped, turning around with wide, innocent eyes, pointing a manicured finger at me. "You do not have to be so rude, Tiana. I was just asking for a favor. Marcus told me you were bitter, but I did not realize you were jealous too." Jealous. I almost laughed. I looked at my mother, Loretta, who was watching from the hallway with a glass of wine, saying absolutely nothing to defend me. In fact, she looked pleased. She enjoyed seeing me put in my place. "There is no room for jealousy in this house." "Tiana," my mother said, stepping forward. Her eyes scanned my simple black outfit, dismissing the quality of the fabric because it lacked a flashy label. "We are celebrating tonight, Ashley, and Marcus are the future of this family. You should try to be happy for them, instead of bringing your negative energy into my home. Now pick up that coat and hang it properly. We have guests coming, and I will not have my entryway looking like a laundry room." I looked at the coat lying on the bench. I looked at Ashley's smug face waiting for me to obey. I looked at Marcus, who had just walked in, sipping a scotch he didn't pay for, grinning like a king in a castle built of sand. This was it. The moment the balance shifted, I didn't pick up the coat. I stepped over it, my heel landing deliberately close to the white fur. I walked past them into the living room, pulling my phone from my pocket. "I did not come here to be your maid," I said quietly, scrolling to a contact labeled Asset Management Team, Initiate, Phase 1. I typed, sending the text without looking up. Phase 1 meant freezing the credit cards. It meant the beginning of the end. They wanted to treat me like a stranger. Fine, I would treat them like I would treat business transaction. And business was about to get very ugly. The room was stiflingly hot, a mix of the heating system being cranked too high and the suffocating weight of my mother's expectations. We sat around the mahogany table that I had paid to have refinished last year, though of course Marcus took credit for it, saying he knew a guy. I was seated at the far end, the spot usually reserved for children or unwanted guests, while Ashley sat to my mother's right, the place of honor. The famous roast was dry, but everyone cooed over it as if Ashley had hunted the cow herself. "So, Marcus, tell us about this deal." Loretta beamed, her eyes shining with the reflection of the chandelier. Marcus wiped his mouth with a linen napkin, leaning back in his chair, like a CEO in a boardroom, rather than a man who had overdrawn his checking account 3 times last month. "It is huge, Mom," he said, his voice booming with unearned confidence. "We are looking at a mixed-use development in Midtown. Luxury condos, retail space, the works. The buy-in is steep, 5 million, but the returns are going to be astronomical. I am talking generational wealth." I took a slow sip of water to hide my expression. I knew the project he was talking about. I had audited the developer behind it 2 years ago. It was a Ponzi scheme wrapped in glass and steel. If Marcus actually had $5 million to invest, he would lose it all by Tuesday, but he didn't have $5 million. He didn't have $5,000. "That sounds incredible, babe," Ashley chimed in, placing a manicured hand on his arm. "You are so ambitious. It is such a turn-on compared to people who just settle for a 9 to 5. She cast a pitying glance in my direction. "No offense, Tiana. I am sure typing numbers is very fulfilling for you." I didn't bite. I sliced a piece of carrot with surgical precision. "It pays the bills, Ashley, and it keeps me out of debt." Loretta slammed her glass down. "Do not start, Tiana. Do not bring your jealousy to this table. Your brother is a visionary. He takes risks. That is why he is going to own this city one day, while you are still renting that dusty little apartment of your grandmother's." The mention of the apartment made the air in the room change. Bernard, my father, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, staring intently at his mashed potatoes. He knew what was coming. I could see the shame radiating off him, but he was too weak to stop it. He had been letting Loretta bulldoze him for 40 years. "Actually, that brings me to something we need to discuss," Loretta said, her tone shifting from angry to businesslike. A tone she adopted whenever she was about to do something particularly cruel. "Marcus needs capital to secure his position in this deal, liquid capital, and your father and I have decided to help him." I put my fork down. "How exactly are you going to do that, Mom? I knew their finances better than they did. Their savings were gone, their credit cards were maxed out, the only asset they had left was the house we were sitting in, and even that was leveraged to the hilt." "We are selling Big Mama's condo," Loretta said. The silence that followed was absolute. Big Mama's condo, the 2-bedroom apartment in downtown Atlanta where I had lived for the past 3 years. It was the only property my grandmother had left solely to my father, bypassing Loretta entirely because she knew her daughter-in-law would squander it. I had moved in when it was falling apart, filled with mold and water damage. I had renovated it with my own money, restoring the hardwood floors, updating the plumbing, turning it into a sanctuary. I paid the property taxes, I paid the HOA fees, I paid the insurance. "You are selling the apartment," I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. "The one I live in." "Yes," Loretta said breezily, picking up her wineglass. "You can find somewhere else. You are single, Tiana. You do not need 2 bedrooms. You can rent a studio or maybe move in with one of your little friends. Marcus has a family. He has a wife. He needs this opportunity more than you need cheap rent." Cheap rent. I paid market value into an account that was supposed to be for my father's medical care. An account I suspected Loretta had been raiding for her shopping trips. "Dad," I said, looking directly at him, "you promised Big Mama you would never sell that place. You promised her it would stay in the family." Bernard looked up, his eyes watery and evasive. "Now, Tiana, you have to understand. Your brother, this deal could change everything for us. We have to think about the future." The future meant Marcus. It always meant Marcus. I was the past. I was the placeholder. I was the resource to be mined until I was dry. "It is already listed," Ashley added with a cruel little smile. "We spoke to a realtor yesterday. She thinks it will go fast, especially with all the upgrades you made. Thanks for that, by the way. It really bumped up the asking price." They had planned this. They had discussed it, laughed about it, and executed it behind my back while I was paying their bills. They were evicting me from the home I built to fund a scam for the brother who ridiculed me. "So let me get this straight," I said slowly, making sure I had the details for the record. "You are kicking me out. You are selling the only stability I have to give Marcus money for a project you have not vetted, and you expect me to just pack up and leave. Do not be dramatic, Tiana, Loretta snapped. We are giving you until the end of the month. That is plenty of time, and do not think about asking for a cut of the sale. That money is for the family business. You have your little job, you will be fine. This was it. The moment the tether snapped. I looked at them. Really looked at them. My mother with her face full of filler and her heart full of greed. My brother with his counterfeit watch and his hollow promises. My sister-in-law with her sneer. And my father, the man who should have protected me, shrinking into his chair. I am not asking for a cut, I said, standing up. I smoothed the front of my jacket. I just wanted to be sure. You are absolutely certain this is what you want to do? 100%, Marcus laughed. Do not be sore, sis. When I make my first million, I might even buy you a car, something used, obviously. Loretta waved a hand at me, shooing me away like a fly. If you are going to sulk, you can leave. We have champagne to open, and I do not want your sour face ruining the toast. Go on, get out. I nodded. Okay, I will go. I did not scream. I did not flip the table. I did not cry. I picked up my clutch from the floor and walked to the door. As I passed Ashley, she whispered loud enough for me to hear, "Finally, the help is leaving." I walked out of the house into the cool night air. The door clicked shut behind me, muffling the sound of their celebration. They were toasting to their future. They were toasting to the money they thought was coming. I walked down the driveway to my Honda Civic. I sat in the driver's seat and took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of old upholstery and impending justice. I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened the secure app that connected me to the family trust, the one I had set up 5 years ago when I bailed them out of their last bankruptcy. The trust that held the deed to the house. The trust that held the title to the cabin. The trust that controlled the credit cards they were currently using to buy that champagne. They thought the apartment belonged to my father. It didn't. I had bought the deed from him 4 years ago when he needed surgery and Loretta wouldn't pay for it. He had signed it over to me in a moment of clarity and desperation, and I had let them believe he still owned it to save his pride. They thought they owned the cabin. They didn't. It was collateral. They thought they had credit. They didn't. They had authorized user cards on my account. I looked at the options on the screen. The glow of the phone illuminated my face in the dark car. Freeze all assets. Revoke authorized users. Initiate foreclosure proceedings. I didn't hesitate. My thumb hovered over the button for a fraction of a second, not out of doubt, but out of savoring the moment. I tapped the screen. Processing. Confirmed. All accounts frozen. Access denied. I put the phone down and started the car. As I pulled away from the curb, I looked back at the house one last time. The lights were blazing. They were warm and happy and full of wine. They had no idea that in exactly 3 minutes, when the waiter tried to run Marcus's card for the next bottle, the world they lived in was going to vanish into thin air. I drove toward the highway, leaving the suburbs behind. I wasn't going back to the apartment to pack. I was going to my penthouse. I was going to pour myself a glass of vintage scotch and watch the notifications roll in. Let the game begin. 7 days had passed since I walked out of my parents' house into the cold night air, and for 7 days I had watched the notifications roll in on my phone like a ticker tape of their demise. It was fascinating to watch the denial in real time. They assumed the frozen accounts were a glitch, a banking error, a mistake that could be yelled away. I sat in my office sipping tea and declining every call while they continued to live in a world that no longer existed. The eviction notice for the apartment had been mailed but hadn't arrived yet. The foreclosure process on the house was churning through the legal system quietly in the background. But the most immediate blow, the one that would finally crack the glass ceiling of their delusion, happened on a Tuesday afternoon at a high-end furniture boutique in Buckhead. I know exactly where Ashley was because the transaction alerts tell a story better than any diary. She was at the Gilded Nest, a store where a throw pillow costs $500 and the air smells like lavender and exclusivity. She was shopping for the cabin, the family cabin on Lake Oconee that my mother had so generously gifted to her and Marcus. The cabin that I legally owned through a shell company and had already slated for liquidation. But Ashley didn't know that. In her mind, she was the new mistress of a lakeside estate, and she needed furniture that reflected her status. I can picture it clearly, because Ashley documents her entire life for an audience of 3,000 followers on Instagram. She posted a story that morning, a selfie in the mirror of the Range Rover I was paying for with the caption, "New Year, new vacation home. Time to gut the old and bring in the chic." She was wearing sunglasses indoors, holding a latte and looking every inch the wealthy wife she pretended to be. She walked into that store with the confidence of a woman who has never had to balance a checkbook in her life. She spent 2 hours selecting items. She picked out a custom Italian leather sectional in a creamy white that would be ruined by red clay mud within a week. She chose a marble dining table that weighed 400 pounds and required a special delivery crew. She added silk drapes, hand-blown glass vases, and a rug that cost $12,000. She was building a fantasy life on a line of credit that I had severed 7 days ago. She walked up to the counter, her heels clicking on the polished concrete floor. There was a line behind her. 2 women who actually lived in the zip code, watching her with that polite southern judgment. Ashley loved an audience. She wanted them to see her spending. She wanted them to know she belonged. She pulled out the heavy metal American Express Platinum card from her purse. It was the family card, the one issued in my father Bernard's name, but linked directly to my high-yield assets as the guarantor. I had given it to my father for emergencies, for medicine, for house repairs. Instead, it had become Ashley's personal allowance. Handed the card to the sales associate, a woman named Sarah, with a perfectly practiced smile. "I am going to need this delivered by Friday," Ashley said loud enough for the back of the room to hear. "We are hosting a housewarming party at the lake, and I need everything perfect. Do not worry about the delivery fee, just add it to the total." Sarah nodded, scanning the items, ringing up a total that came to $42,000. It was an obscene amount of money, especially for people who didn't have jobs. Ashley didn't even flinch. She tapped her manicured nails on the glass countertop, smiling at her reflection in a nearby mirror, waiting for the receipt, waiting for the validation. Sarah swiped the card. The machine beeped a harsh, dissonant sound that cut through the soft jazz playing in the store. "I am sorry, ma'am," Sarah said, her voice dropping an octave. The card was declined. Ashley laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "Do not be silly. Run it again. It is a platinum card. It does not have a limit, maybe. Your machine is having connection issues." Sarah swiped it again. Slower this time, holding eye contact. The beep was louder. Declined. I can imagine the heat rising up Ashley's neck. The women in line shifted, shifting their weight, impatient and amused. Ashley's smile faltered, dropping at the corners. "Look, I do not know what is wrong with your system," she snapped, her voice getting shrill. "Do you know who my husband is? We spend more money in a month than you make in a year. Try it manually." Sarah sighed, tapping the keys. "I cannot force it through, ma'am. The bank is returning a code. It says the account has been closed by the grantor." Closed. Ashley repeated the word like it was a foreign language. "That is impossible. My father-in-law owns that account. Run this one instead." She dug into her purse and pulled out a second card. This one was a Visa Gold issued to Marcus. It was an authorized user card on the same account, linked to the same frozen assets. She threw it on the counter with a sneer. "There, use that one. And I want a discount for the embarrassment you are causing me." Sarah ran the second card. The machine didn't even hesitate. "Declined. Please contact the financial institution." The air left the room. Ashley stood there, surrounded by $40,000 worth of imaginary furniture, holding 2 pieces of useless plastic. The veneer of wealth cracked wide open. The women behind her started whispering. Ashley snatched the cards back, her hands shaking visibly now. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, causing the manager to look over from the back office. "I am calling my husband. You people are incompetent." She pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen, dialing Marcus. She put it on speaker because Ashley does not understand privacy or shame. She needed someone to blame, and Marcus was the easiest target. "Marcus, pick up," she hissed when the line connected. "Where are you?" "Hey, babe. I am at lunch with the investors." Marcus's voice came through tinny and relaxed, oblivious to the cliff he had already fallen off. "What is up? Your cards are not working," Ashley screamed right in the middle of the store, the Amex and the Visa. Both declined. "The girl says the account is closed. You told me the transfer went through for the cabin renovation. You told me we had the funds." There was a pause on the other end. A long, heavy silence followed by the sound of a chair scraping against a floor. Marcus's voice dropped, losing its bravado. "What do you mean, declined? I used the card this morning for gas." "Well, it is not working now," Ashley yelled, ignoring the manager who was now approaching her, asking her to lower her voice. "I am standing here like an idiot with people staring at me." "Fix it, Marcus. Call the bank. Call your father. Do something. I cannot call the bank." Marcus stammered, panic creeping in. "Tiana handles the bank stuff. She manages the family trust accounts. I do not even have the password." "Then call her," Ashley shrieked. "Call your sister and tell her to fix this glitch right now. I am not leaving this store until I get my furniture." I watched the alert on my phone screen. Incoming call. Marcus Wilson. I let it ring once, twice, watching the name dance across the glass. I took a sip of my tea. The phone stopped ringing, then started again immediately. He was frantic now. The embarrassment of his wife was bleeding into his own reality. He was probably trying to pay for his business lunch right now, realizing his own wallet was full of plastic duds. I didn't answer. Instead, I waited for the inevitable voicemail. But then he tried again, and this time he got the new greeting I had set up just for them. The recording clicked on cool and professional. It was not my voice. It was the voice of my attorney, Mr. Sterling. "You have reached the legal counsel for Tiana Wilson. If you are calling regarding personal matters, please be advised that Ms. Wilson has ceased all direct communication. If you are calling regarding the outstanding debts, liabilities, or foreclosure proceedings for the Wilson estate, please leave a message or contact our office during business hours. Please be aware that any harassment will be added to the pending litigation." I can only imagine Marcus's face as he heard those words. Litigation, foreclosure, ceased communication. The words that dismantled his entire world in 30 seconds. He wasn't calling a sister to bully into submission anymore. He was calling a creditor. Back in the store, Ashley was still ranting, but the manager had seen enough. "Ma'am, I am going to have to ask you to leave," the manager said, firm and loud. "The payment has been declined, and you are disturbing our other customers. Please leave before we call security." Ashley looked at the phone, where Marcus was likely stammering, explanations that made no sense. She looked at the sales associate who was already putting the voided receipt in the trash. She looked at the women in line who were openly laughing now. "You will hear from us," Ashley spat, grabbing her purse, clutching it like a shield. She turned on her heel and stormed out of the store, the bell on the door chiming a cheerful goodbye to her dignity. I set my phone down on my desk. The first domino had fallen. They knew now. They knew the money was gone. They knew I was gone, but they still didn't understand the scale of it. They thought this was a tantrum, a temporary freeze. They didn't realize that the ground beneath their feet didn't belong to them anymore. It belonged to TT Holdings. And I was just getting started. The Friday afternoon traffic heading out of Atlanta toward Lake Oconee was brutal, but I imagine the air inside Marcus's leased BMW was even heavier. They were driving to the cabin, the sprawling lakeside retreat that had been in our family for 2 generations, the property my mother, Loretta, had so graciously gifted them at the dinner table just 5 days ago. They were going there to escape the humiliation of the credit card incident, to lick their wounds and play house in a mansion they believed was their birthright. I sat in my office, reviewing the security feed from the camera I had installed at the cabin's main gate 3 months ago. I watched the black BMW pull up the dust from the gravel road kicking up behind them. I could see Ashley in the passenger seat, sunglasses on, looking out the window, probably envisioning where she would put the $40,000 worth of furniture she tried to buy with my money. They looked like a couple going on a romantic getaway, oblivious to the fact that they were driving straight into a legal fortress. Marcus pulled up to the iron gates, expecting them to swing open automatically as they always did. He pressed the remote clipped to his visor. Nothing happened. He pressed it again, harder this time, jamming his thumb into the plastic. I saw him hit the steering wheel in frustration, mouthing words that I am sure were not fit for church. He rolled down his window and punched the code into the keypad. The keypad beeped red. Access denied. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my espresso. This was the moment reality began to set in. The gate wasn't broken. The code hadn't been changed by accident. The heavy industrial chain wrapped around the center pillars, secured with a padlock. The size of a fist was a very deliberate message. Marcus got out of the car, slamming the door. He was wearing a polo shirt and boat shoes, the uniform of the leisure class he desperately wanted to join. He walked up to the gate, shaking it, rattling the chain. The metal clanking echoed through the quiet woods. He yelled something toward the house, unaware that the house was empty, stripped of the expensive electronics he had planned to sell to cover his gambling debts. Ashley got out next, looking annoyed. She pointed at the sign I had posted on the gate just that morning. It was a white metal sign, stark and official, property of T&T Recovery, private property. No trespassing violators will be prosecuted. Marcus pulled out his phone. He was calling me. I let it go to voicemail. He called our father Bernard. He probably didn't answer because I had changed his number yesterday to protect him from their harassment. Then, predictably, Marcus did exactly what I wanted him to do. He called the police. I switched tabs on my computer to the police scanner feed, waiting. It took 20 minutes for the Greene County Sheriff deputy to arrive, flashing lights cutting through the tree line. Marcus waved him down, putting on his best aggrieved homeowner act. I could see him gesturing wildly, pointing at the gate, then at the house, claiming he was being locked out of his own property, that someone had illegally secured his inheritance. The deputy, a calm man named Officer Miller, walked up to the gate. He didn't look at Marcus. He looked at the sign. Then he looked at the clipboard the security guard was holding. The security guard, I had hired a man named Mr. Henderson, stepped out from the shadows of the guard shack that Marcus never bothered to staff. Mr. Henderson was 6'4" and built like a linebacker. He wore a uniform that said T&T Asset Protection. I watched the exchange on the monitor. Marcus was shouting, now his face turning red. He was telling the deputy that his mother, Loretta Wilson, owned this property and she had given it to him. He was demanding that Mr. Henderson be arrested for trespassing. Officer Miller held up a hand, silencing Marcus. He walked over to Mr. Henderson and took a thick file folder from him. The file contained the deed, the transfer of title, the foreclosure documents, and the eviction notice that had been legally served to my parents' address 6 months ago. Marcus looked confused. He stepped closer, trying to read the papers over the deputy's shoulder. "That is my house," he sputtered. "My name is Marcus Wilson." Officer Miller turned around, his face stern. "Mr. Wilson, according to these documents, this property does not belong to you. It does not belong to your mother either. It was foreclosed upon 6 months ago due to non-payment of a $300,000 lien. The debt was purchased, and the title transferred to T&T Recovery LLC." Marcus froze. The color drained from his face. "Foreclosed," he stammered. "That is impossible. My father paid off the mortgage years ago." "He did pay off the mortgage," I whispered to the screen. "But he didn't pay off the business loan you took out in his name, did he?" "Marcus, The loan you defaulted on. The loan I bought for pennies on the dollar to save the property from going to public auction. Officer Miller continued. The current owner, Ms. Tiana Wilson, acting as the principal of T&T Recovery, allowed the previous occupants to remain on the premises as a courtesy. That courtesy has been revoked as of January 1st. You are trespassing. Ashley let out a shriek that the microphone picked up clearly. Tiana, she owns this, Marcus. Tell him he is lying. Tiana is a secretary. She does not own anything. The deputy looked at Ashley, then back at Marcus. I suggest you leave, folks. The owners have a standing order to prosecute trespassers. You have 5 minutes to turn that car around before I have to write you a citation. Marcus looked at the gate, looked at the house he thought was his, and then looked at the deputy. The realization was hitting him like a physical blow. The T&T stood for Tiana, the company that had been sending them notices. The company they ignored because they thought it was just junk mail was me. I had owned the roof over their heads for half a year, allowing them to play pretend while I paid the property taxes. But I wasn't done yet. As Marcus stumbled back to the car, defeated and humiliated, another vehicle pulled up the long driveway. It was a tow truck. I had timed this perfectly. Marcus had leased his BMW through a predatory lender, one that worked closely with asset recovery firms like mine. He was 4 months behind on payments. He had been hiding the car at the cabin, thinking the repo men wouldn't find him out in the country. But I knew where he was, and I knew the repo man. The truck backed up, blocking the BMW, and Officer Miller watched, his arms crossed, leaning against his cruiser. Marcus started screaming again, running toward the tow truck driver, waving his arms like a madman. You cannot take my car, he yelled. This is a mistake. I paid it. The driver didn't even argue. He just hooked up the chains, efficient and silent. Ashley was crying now, sitting on the gravel in her designer jeans, watching their getaway vehicle being hoisted into the air. Officer Miller intervened. One last time. Mr. Wilson, let the man do his job. You can ride back to town with your wife in the cruiser if you need a lift to a rental agency, but this car is gone. I watched them standing there in the dust as the tow truck rumbled away with the BMW. Marcus looked small, broken, stripped of his car, his house, and his pride. Ashley looked furious, plotting her next move, realizing she had bet on the wrong horse. They had driven there to celebrate their victory over me. They ended up stranded on the side of a dirt road, locked out of a family legacy they had squandered, evicted by the sister they called a failure. I closed the laptop and finished my tea. The cabin was secure. The car was repossessed. Phase 2 was complete, but the biggest blow was yet to come. They still had the house in Buckhead, or at least they thought they did. But Monday morning was coming, and with it the final piece of the puzzle that would leave them with absolutely nowhere to hide. I picked up my phone and sent a text to my assistant. Proceed with the office visit. It was time to introduce Marcus to the real Tiana Wilson, not the sister he mocked, but the shark he never saw coming. Monday morning arrived with the kind of aggressive brightness that usually signals a very bad day for someone who hasn't slept. Marcus had spent the weekend in a rage, fueled by humiliation and cheap motel coffee. After being evicted from the cabin and watching his car get towed, he and Ashley had been forced to take an Uber back to the city. The ride cost $300, which Ashley paid with a credit card she had hidden from him, creating yet another fracture in their already crumbling alliance. By the time he woke up on Monday, he wasn't just angry, he was desperate. And desperate men make stupid mistakes. He decided to confront me at work. In his mind, I was still the lowly data entry clerk working in a basement office somewhere downtown. He thought he could storm in, cause a scene, and shame me into giving him his life back. He thought he could bully me into submission, just like he had done since we were kids. He didn't know that my office wasn't in a basement. It was on the 42nd floor of the Sovereign Tower, the most prestigious financial address in Atlanta. And he didn't know that I wasn't just an employee, I was a partner. I was in the middle of a briefing with my team, reviewing the asset forfeiture plan for a corrupt senator, when the call came from the lobby security desk. Ms. Wilson, there is a gentleman here to see you. The guard's voice was polite but tense. He claims to be your brother. He is quite agitated. I smiled, looking at the security feed on my monitor. There was Marcus standing in the marble lobby of the Sovereign Tower, looking completely out of place. He was wearing a rumpled suit, clearly the same one he had worn all weekend, and he was shouting at the receptionist, pointing a finger in her face. Behind him, a group of Japanese investors I recognized as potential clients for his failed real estate deal were watching with wide eyes. They were waiting for their own meeting, likely with another firm in the building, and Marcus was giving them a show they wouldn't forget. "Send him up," I said calmly, "but have security escort him. Do not let him on the elevator alone." I turned to my team. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you will excuse me for a moment, I have a family matter to attend to. Please continue reviewing the Johnson file." I walked out of the conference room, my heels clicking on the Italian marble floor. I wasn't wearing the drab gray skirts I wore to my parents' house. Today, I was wearing a bespoke navy suit cut to perfection with a silk blouse and Louboutin heels. My hair was down-styled in loose waves, not pulled back in the severe bun my mother hated. I looked like exactly what I was, a woman who controlled millions of dollars in assets. When the elevator doors opened, Marcus stormed out ready to launch into a tirade. "Tiana, you ungrateful little—" He started, his voice echoing in the quiet, sophisticated lobby of my firm. But then he stopped. He looked around, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city, the original modern art on the walls, the quiet hum of serious money being made. And then he looked at me. He froze, his mouth hanging open slightly. He looked at my suit, my shoes, the Rolex on my wrist. He looked at the name on the glass wall behind me. T&T Holdings, Asset Recovery, and Forensic Accounting. Partner Tiana Wilson. "What is this?" he whispered, the fight draining out of him, replaced by confusion. "This isn't data. This. Entry. No." "Marcus, it isn't," I said, stepping forward, my voice cool and professional. "This is my company. The company that owns the debt you defaulted on. The company that owns the cabin you were trespassing in, and the company that is about to foreclose on Mom and Dad's house. If you don't start making sense very quickly." He stared at me, blinking rapidly, as if trying to reconcile the sister he knew with the woman standing in front of him. You own this, but Mom said you were broke. Mom said you were a failure. Mom sees what she wants to see," I replied, crossing my arms. "You, on the other hand, should have known better. You pride yourself on being a businessman, Marcus. Yet you never once checked who bought your debt. You never looked at the signature on the eviction notice. You were so busy playing big shot that you didn't notice the shark swimming in your own pool." The investors in the lobby had followed the commotion up, likely curious to see where the crazy man had gone. They were standing by the elevators watching us. Marcus saw them, and his face turned a deep shade of crimson. He recognized Mr. Tanaka, the lead investor he had been trying to court for months. "Mr. Tanaka," Marcus stammered, trying to smooth his rumpled jacket. "This is just a misunderstanding. My sister and I were just discussing." Mr. Tanaka didn't look at Marcus. He looked at me. He recognized me from a charity gala last month where I had donated $50,000. "Ms. Wilson?" he said, bowing slightly. "I did not know this man was your brother." "He is," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. "Unfortunately, but we do not do business together. Mr. Tanaka, my firm has strict standards regarding financial solvency and ethical conduct." Mr. Tanaka nodded, his face impassive. "I see. We will keep that in mind. Good day, Ms. Wilson." He turned and walked away, taking his group and Marcus's last hope of a legitimate investment with him. Marcus watched them go, his hands clenching into fists. He turned back to me, his eyes filled with hatred. "You ruined it," he hissed. "You ruined everything. Why are you doing this? Is this because of the dinner? Because Mom was mean to you? You are destroying your own family for revenge." I laughed. A short, humorless sound. Revenge. Marcus. This isn't revenge. This is accounting. You borrowed money. You didn't pay it back. You lived a lifestyle you couldn't afford on my dime. You disrespected me in my own home. Yes, the apartment was mine too, and you tried to kick me out to fund a scam. I am just balancing the books. Security, I said, nodding to the two large men standing behind him. Please escort Mr. Wilson out of the building and ensure he is banned from the premises. If he returns, call the police. Marcus started to shout again, but the guards were on him in a second, each taking an arm. They marched him toward the elevators, his feet dragging on the marble, screaming that I was a thief, a liar, a traitor. The elevator doors closed, cutting off his voice, leaving only the quiet hum of the office. I stood there for a moment, smoothing my jacket. My assistant Sarah walked up, holding a file folder. Ms. Wilson, your mother is online. She sounds hysterical, Sarah said, her face neutral. Do you want to take it? I looked at the phone on the reception desk, blinking red. Loretta. She had probably just received the foreclosure notice, or maybe Marcus had called her from the lobby screaming about my betrayal. No, I said, turning back toward the conference room. Let it go to voicemail. I have a meeting to finish. And Sarah, yes, Ms. Wilson, send a fruit basket to Mr. Tanaka's office. With my compliments, tell him I look forward to seeing him at the gala next week. Yes, ma'am? I walked back into the conference room, closing the door on the chaos. The office raid was over. Marcus had seen the truth, but he still didn't understand the full extent of it. He thought he had lost a deal. He didn't realize he was about to lose his freedom. Because the file on my desk, the one I had been reviewing before he arrived, wasn't just about his debts, it was about the company funds he had embezzled. The funds he stole from our father's medical trust. Phase 3 was about to begin. And this time, I wasn't just taking his money, I was taking his reputation. The phone rang at 8 o'clock that evening, just as I was pouring a glass of wine in my penthouse. The city lights of Atlanta sprawled out below me, a glittering carpet of success that felt miles away from the desperate clawing need of my family. I knew it was Loretta, even before I looked at the screen. She had let Marcus do the yelling, now it was her turn to do the crying. It was their standard operating procedure. Good cop, bad cop. Except they were both bad cops and they were both incompetent. I answered on the third ring, putting it on speaker while I swirled the Cabernet in my glass. You are trying to kill him, my mother sobbed without preamble. Her voice was thick, wet with tears that might have even been real for once. You are trying to kill your father. Tiana, are you happy now? The stress is going to stop. His heart. I took a sip of wine, cool and composed. You are the one who stopped paying for his heart medication. Mom, I said, my voice steady. I checked the pharmacy logs. He hasn't had his prescription filled in 3 weeks. Where did that money go? How dare you, she shrieked. The sorrow instantly replaced by defensive rage. We are doing the best we can. You have no idea the pressure we are under. Marcus needs support. The family needs support. And you are out there playing corporate raider, destroying everything we built. I am not destroying anything. I am just turning on the lights. I said, if you want to talk, we can talk, but not over the phone. Meet me at the coffee shop on Piedmont. The one with the green awning. In 30 minutes. Come alone. If I see Marcus, I leave. If I see Ashley, I leave. I hung up before she could argue. I grabbed the thick manila folder from my desk, the one labeled Wilson Family Audit. It was heavy, dense with the weight of 5 years of lies. I checked my appearance in the mirror, immaculate, unbothered, and headed out into the night. I arrived 10 minutes early, securing a table in the back corner. It was neutral ground, public enough to prevent a scene, private enough for the devastation I was about to unleash. Loretta arrived 5 minutes late, wearing sunglasses at night and a headscarf, trying to look like a celebrity, trying to avoid paparazzi, but looking more like a woman on the run from her own life. She sat down opposite me, refusing to take off the glasses. "You look terrible," I said honestly. She snatched the menu, pushing it aside. "I do not want coffee. I want you to stop this madness. Unlock the accounts, Tiana. Give Marcus back his car, and for the love of God, take those chains off the cabin gate." "Do you know what the neighbors are saying? They think we are criminals?" I placed the folder on the table between us. The sound of it hitting the wood was heavy, a dull thud that made Loretta flinch. "You are criminals, Mom," I said softly. I opened the folder, revealing the first page, a spreadsheet color-coded in red and black. "This is a forensic audit of the family businesses going back 3 years. I did it myself." She looked at the papers, then away. Dismissive. "I do not understand your little charts. You will understand this." I pointed to a figure circled in red bold marker. "Marcus has lost $500,000 in the last 36 months. $500,000. Mom gone vaporized." "That is a lie," she hissed, leaning forward, lowering her voice. "Marcus is an investor. Markets fluctuate. You do not understand high finance. I understand that he invested $100,000 in a crypto scam that was debunked 2 years ago," I said, flipping the page. "I understand that he spent $50,000 on a business consultant who turned out to be his fraternity brother living in Miami. And I understand that he withdrew $80,000 in cash from the business operating account the week before Ashley bought her new nose." Loretta froze. Her hand went to her throat, clutching the pearls that I had bought her for Mother's Day 3 years ago. "You leave Ashley out of this." "I cannot leave her out, because she is the biggest line item on the expense report." I flipped to the next section labeled, "Lifestyle Maintenance. Lease payments for cars they cannot afford. Designer handbags listed as office supplies. Spa treatments categorized as client development." "It is embezzlement, Mom. Plain and simple. Marcus isn't running a business. He is running a personal piggy bank. And the worst part is, he drained the company dry 18 months ago." "So where has the money been coming from?" Loretta asked, her voice trembling slightly. A crack in the armor. She knew. The question wasn't curiosity. It was fear. I turned to the final section of the dossier, the one labeled Bernard Wilson, Medical and Retirement Trust. This was the part that made my blood run cold, the part that had turned my sadness into a weapon. "You raided Dad's retirement fund," I said. The words were stones heavy and hard. "You have been siphoning money from the account meant for his care, meant for his golden years. You took it all to plug the holes in Marcus's sinking ship, to buy Ashley's silence, to keep up appearances at the country club." Loretta straightened up, taking off her sunglasses to glare at me with watery, red-rimmed eyes. "It was necessary," she said, her voice taking on that familiar, self-righteous tone. "Your father would want to help his son. He would want to save the family legacy. We borrowed it, Tiana. We were going to put it back as soon as Marcus's deal closed." "There is no deal, Mom." I slammed my hand on the table, making the coffee cups rattle. "There never was a deal. And you didn't borrow anything. You stole. But here is the part you don't know. The part that is going to keep you awake at night." I leaned in close, locking eyes with her. I wanted to see it. I wanted to see the moment the realization hit. "You think you have been spending Dad's money for the last 2 years? You think that bottomless pit of cash you have been dipping into was his hard-earned savings?" Loretta blinked, confusion clouding her anger. "What are you talking about?" "Dad's account hit zero 2 years ago," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "He was broke. Mom, you and Marcus bled him dry 24 months ago. The bank called me. They were going to close the account. They were going to bounce the check for his heart medication." She stared at me, her mouth opening slightly, working soundlessly. "I couldn't let him die," I continued. "So I linked my personal account to his. I set up an automatic transfer. Every time you withdrew money, every time Marcus needed a bailout, Every time Ashley swiped that card, it didn't come from Dad. It came from me. Loretta recoiled as if I had slapped her. She pressed her back against the booth, shaking her head. No, that is not true. Look at the statements I pulled out, the bank records showing the deposits, monthly injections of $5,000, $10,000, sometimes $20,000, all from Tiana Wilson. All from the daughter you called a failure. The daughter you wouldn't let sit at the head of the table. For 2 years I have been funding your delusion. I said I paid for the cars, I paid for the clothes, I paid for the food in your refrigerator, I paid for the roof over your head while you mocked me for living in an apartment. And you didn't even know it. You were so busy looking down on me that you didn't realize you were standing on my shoulders. Tears were streaming down Loretta's face now, but they weren't the manipulative tears from the phone call. They were tears of humiliation. Tears of a woman who realizes she has bitten the hand that fed her, and that hand has now formed a fist. I thought it was Bernard's, she whispered. I thought we still had time. You have no time, I said, closing the folder. I cut the transfer yesterday. The well is dry, Mom. The next time you try to buy a dress or pay a bill, or give Marcus money for his imaginary empire, it is going to decline. And when Dad asks why he can't afford his doctor, you are going to have to tell him exactly where his money went. Loretta reached out her hand, trembling, trying to touch my arm. Tiana, please, you cannot do this. We will pay you back. Marcus is close to something big. I swear. We just need a few more months. I pulled my arm away, standing up. I looked down at her, small and pathetic in the booth, surrounded by the evidence of her own greed. I don't want your money, Mom. I want you to feel what it is like to be powerless. I want you to know that every luxury you enjoyed for the last 2 years was charity from the daughter you despised. And now the charity is over. I picked up my purse, leaving the folder on the table. It was a copy. I had the originals safely locked away. You should probably order a coffee, I said, turning to leave. It is going to be a long walk home. I canceled your Uber account on my way over. I walked out of the coffee shop into the crisp night air, leaving my mother staring at the spreadsheet that proved her golden son was a thief and her scapegoat daughter was the only reason she wasn't living on the street. Phase 3 was complete. The secrets were out. The money was gone. Now it was time to let them tear each other apart. The fallout from the frozen accounts was immediate and catastrophic, but while my mother was weeping in a coffee shop, Ashley was busy showing her true colors back at the house. The well had run dry, and rats are always the first to flee a sinking ship, barely 48 hours after the credit card decline. Ashley had turned on Marcus with a viciousness that would have been impressive if it wasn't so predictable. She wasn't interested in standing by her man through sickness and health, or through poverty and debt. She was interested in maintaining the illusion of the lifestyle she felt entitled to. I heard about the chaos from my neighbors, who were more than happy to update me on the drama unfolding at my parents' house. The driveway had become a marketplace of desperation. Marcus was forced to sell his collection of sneakers, rare Jordans, and limited releases that he had spent thousands on trying to look like a mogul. He sold them for cash to a reseller, who lowballed him in the front yard, while the neighbors watched. Ashley stood on the porch screaming at him not to touch her things, but she had already packed 3 suitcases of designer clothes and hidden them in the trunk of her car, just in case. She forced him to pawn his Rolex, the one he claimed was a gift from a business partner, but was actually bought with my father's heart medication money. He got $6,000 for it, and Ashley took $4,000 immediately, claiming she needed it for groceries and essentials. Essentials apparently included a trip to the salon and a bottle of Veuve Clicquot because she refused to be poor without bubbles. Marcus was spiraling, selling off pieces of his ego just to keep the lights on for another week, but it wasn't enough. The mortgage was months behind. The utilities were overdue, and the lifestyle Ashley demanded required a burn rate of $10,000 a month. When she realized Marcus was truly tapped out, that there were no more secret accounts to raid and no more sisters to bully, she turned her sights on the only person left with liquidity. Me. She didn't know where I lived exactly. My parents thought I was in a studio apartment in a bad neighborhood, but Ashley was devious. She had gone through my old mail at the house and found a forwarded letter from a high-end interior design firm, a bill for custom drapery installation at an address in Buckhead. The address of my penthouse. I was sitting on my terrace reviewing the foreclosure timeline when the buzzer rang from the concierge desk downstairs. "Ms. Wilson, there is a woman here to see you," the concierge said, his voice hushed. "She says she is your sister-in-law, and it is a medical emergency." I paused, swirling my tea. A medical emergency. It was a smart play. If she had just demanded to see me, I would have told security to remove her, but playing the health card forced a reaction. I knew she was lying, but curiosity is a dangerous thing, and I wanted to see how far she would go. "Send her up," I said, "but tell security to wait outside my door just in case." When I opened the door, Ashley stood there looking surprisingly put together. She wasn't wearing her usual flashy logos. Instead, she had dressed in a modest cream sweater and jeans, trying to look humble, trying to look like a victim. Her eyes widened as she looked past me into the apartment. She took in the 20-foot ceilings, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline, the original art on the walls. It was a palace compared to the crumbling facade she was living in. "Tiana," she breathed, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "You live here. This whole time you have been living like this while we were struggling." I closed the door, leaving it unlocked for the security team waiting in the hall. "I wasn't struggling, Ashley. I was working. You should try it sometime." "What is the medical emergency?" She turned to me, her face crumbling into a practiced expression of distress. "It isn't me. It is the baby." I raised an eyebrow. "The baby." "Yes," she whispered, placing a hand on her flat stomach. "I haven't told Marcus yet. I haven't told anyone because of all the stress. We found out last week. I am pregnant, Tiana. You are going to be an aunt." I stared at her, letting the silence stretch. I knew Ashley better than she knew herself. I knew she drank 3 glasses of wine at dinner, 5 days ago. I knew she had just refilled her birth control prescription because the pharmacy charges came through on the account the day before I froze it. She wasn't pregnant. She was desperate. "That is quite a miracle, considering the wine you drank on New Year's Eve," I said dryly, walking over to the kitchen island. She didn't flinch. "I didn't know then." She lied smoothly. "But now I do. And Tiana, I am scared. Marcus is falling apart. He is selling everything. We have no money for doctors. We have no money for prenatal vitamins. The stress is bad for the baby. I am cramping. Tiana, I am terrified I might lose it." She walked closer, reaching out a hand as if to touch me, but stopping when she saw the look in my eyes. "Look, I know we have had our differences. I know I haven't been the best sister-in-law, but this is an innocent child, your own flesh and blood. You cannot let your niece or nephew suffer because you are mad at Marcus." She was good. I had to give her that. She hit every emotional button. Family innocence, guilt, shame. But she forgot one thing. I deal with liars for a living. I deal with people who hide assets and fake deaths and fabricate entire lives to avoid paying what they owe. Ashley was an amateur. "How much?" I asked, leaning against the marble counter. She blinked, pretending to be confused. "What? How much money do you want?" "Ashley, drop the act. I know you are here for a payout. So give me a number. What is the price of this miracle baby?" Her face hardened. The humble act vanished, replaced by the cold calculation I recognized. "We need 50,000, she said, her voice sharp. "Cash. That will cover the immediate debts and get us into a new place. A safe place for the baby." $50,000? I laughed softly. "You think I am going to give you $50,000 based on a word? And what happens when the money runs out in 3 months because you bought a new wardrobe instead of a crib?" "It will not run out," she snapped. "We have a plan. Marcus has a new deal lining up." Marcus does not have a deal. I cut her off. Marcus is uninsurable and blacklisted by every reputable lender in the state. And you are not pregnant, Ashley. Her eyes narrowed to slits, proving my point. How dare you? You are so cold, Tiana. You are a monster. You would risk your brother's child just to prove a point. I am not risking anything, I said, walking around the counter to face her. I am protecting my assets from a predator, and that is all you are, Ashley. A predator. You found a weak family with a little bit of money and you bled them dry. And now that the host is dying, you are looking for a new vein. She stepped closer, invading my personal space, her perfume cloying and sweet. Listen to me, you bitch, she hissed, her voice dropping low, venomous. I do not care what you think you know. If you do not give me that money, I am leaving him. I will walk out that door, and I will take this baby with me. Marcus will never see his child. Your parents will never see their grandchild. And I will tell everyone, it was your fault. I will tell the church. I will tell the neighbors. I will tell everyone that Tiana Wilson, the millionaire, let her brother's baby starve because she was too stingy to help. I stood my ground, my heart rate steady. I pulled my phone from my pocket, holding it casually. You would do that. You would destroy your husband simply because the money ran out. You do not love him at all, do you? Love him, she scoffed, a harsh, ugly sound. Love does not pay the bills. Tiana, I married him because he promised me a life. He promised me security. He lied. He is a loser just like you used to be, and if you do not pay up, I am done with him. I never wanted kids anyway, but if this pregnancy gets me a settlement, then I will play the part. But if you do not pay, I will terminate it and I will send you the bill. The air in the room seemed to freeze. The mask was completely gone now, revealing the rot underneath. She had just admitted everything. The marriage was a sham. The baby was a bargaining chip. The love was a transaction. She was willing to use a fictional child, or perhaps a real one, she intended to discard as a weapon to extort me. You are admitting it, I said quietly, making sure my voice was clear. You only married him for the money, and you are using a pregnancy real or fake to blackmail me. I am doing what I have to do to survive, she said, tossing her hair. Call it blackmail, call it business. I do not care. Just write the check or say goodbye to the only legacy your pathetic family has left. I looked at her for a long moment, letting the weight of her words settle, letting the recording software on my phone capture every syllable of her confession. She thought she had won. She thought she had cornered me. She thought the threat of losing a grandchild would break me, just like it would break my mother. Get out, I said simply. She smirked, crossing her arms. You have 24 hours, Tiana. Transfer the money, or I file for divorce, and I take the baby away forever. She turned and walked to the door, swaying her hips, confident in her victory. She paused with her hand on the handle, looking back over her shoulder. You have a nice place here, Tiana. It would be a shame if everyone found out how heartless the owner is. She left, slamming the heavy door behind her. I stood in the silence of my penthouse looking at my phone. The recording was 4 minutes and 12 seconds long. It was crystal clear. It captured the extortion, the admission of marrying for money, the threat to terminate this pregnancy for cash. It was the final nail in the coffin of my family's delusion. I saved the file, backing it up to the cloud, and then emailing a copy to my attorney. Then I sent a text to Marcus. I didn't say much. Just one sentence. Check your email, brother. I think you should know who you are sleeping with. Ashley thought she was playing chess, but she didn't realize she was already in checkmate. She had just handed me the weapon to destroy her, and I was going to use it not to save Marcus because he didn't deserve saving, but to clear the board entirely. Phase 4 was coming, and it was going to be televised. The vibration of my phone against the marble nightstand woke me instantly at 2 in the morning. It wasn't the soft ping of an email or the buzz of a text. It was the relentless, jarring ring of an emergency. I fumbled for it, my heart hammering against my ribs before I even saw the caller ID. It was the hospital. Your father has collapsed. Ms. Wilson? The nurse said, her voice clipped and professional. He is in critical condition. You need to get to Emory Midtown immediately. I didn't ask questions. I didn't ask for details. I just moved, pulling on jeans and a sweater, grabbing my keys and sprinting to the elevator. The drive was a blur of red lights and empty highways. My mind was racing, not with fear but with a cold, hard calculation. Bernard Wilson had a heart condition. He had been managing it for years. He was stable. The only reason he would collapse, the only reason he would be critical, was if something had interrupted his treatment. And I knew exactly what that something was. When I burst through the sliding glass doors of the emergency room, the scene was chaos. But amidst the beeping monitors and rushing doctors, I heard a familiar voice screeching. It was Loretta. This is a mistake. She was yelling at a terrified woman behind the registration desk. We have insurance. We have excellent insurance. My son is a developer. Run it again. I walked toward the noise, my boots heavy on the linoleum floor. Loretta was standing there in her nightgown with a coat thrown over it, her hair in rollers, clutching her purse like a weapon. Marcus was beside her, looking pale and useless, leaning against the wall, as if he were the one who needed medical attention. Mom, I said, my voice cutting through her tirade. Where is he? She spun around, her eyes wild, looking for a target, looking for someone to blame besides herself. You, she hissed, pointing a shaking finger at me. You did this. This is your fault, Tiana. You cut us off. You froze the accounts, and now your father is dying because of you. I ignored her, turning to the woman at the desk. I am Tiana Wilson, Bernard Wilson's daughter. What is the status of his admission? The receptionist looked relieved to be speaking to someone sane. Ms. Wilson, we are trying to process his admission, but there is a problem with the insurance. The policy on file has lapsed due to non-payment. It was canceled 3 months ago. We cannot authorize the cardiac catheterization without payment or a valid policy. I felt the blood drain from my face. 3 months ago. That was before I froze the accounts. That was back when I was still depositing $5,000 a month into the joint account, specifically labeled medical expenses. I looked at Loretta. She stopped screaming. She looked away, unable to meet my gaze. You didn't pay the premium, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. I gave you the money, Mom. I saw the transfer leave my account every first of the month. You took the money for Dad's heart medication and his insurance and you spent it. It was just a temporary reallocation, Marcus mumbled from the wall, trying to make himself look smaller. We were going to pay it back double once the deal closed. We didn't think he would have an episode so soon. So soon. I stepped toward him and he flinched. You gambled with his life, Marcus. You took the safety net that kept his heart beating, and you bought a lease on a car. You do not drive anymore. You are not just a thief. You are a predator. Loretta stepped between us, her maternal instinct kicking in, only to protect the son who helped destroy her husband. Stop it, Tiana. This isn't the time for your lectures. We need to get him treated. The hospital is refusing service because of your little stunt with the bank cards. Fix it. Pay them. The audacity was breathtaking. She was standing over the wreckage she created, demanding, I clean it up while blaming me for the crash. I turned back to the receptionist, ignoring my family completely. How much for the procedure and a private room in the cardiac ICU? The receptionist blinked, surprised by the pivot. The estimated cost for the surgery and a 3-day stay without insurance is roughly $45,000. Ms. Wilson, we would need a substantial deposit to proceed immediately. I reached into my wallet and pulled out the card. It wasn't the plastic debit card Marcus used. It wasn't the gold card Ashley flashed around town. It was heavy, black titanium, the Centurion card. Invite only, limitless and utterly undeniable. I placed it on the counter with a metallic click. Charge it all, I said. Do not just authorize the surgery. Upgrade him to the VIP wing. Get the chief of cardiology down here. I want Dr. Evans. If he is sleeping, wake him up. Put everything on this card. The surgery, the room, the recovery. Whatever he needs. The receptionist's eyes widened as she took the card. Her demeanor shifted instantly from harried bureaucrat to deferential service provider. Yes, Ms. Wilson, right away. I will page Dr. Evans immediately. I turned around to face my mother and brother. They were staring at the card in the receptionist's hand. It was the holy grail of status, the symbol of wealth they had pretended to have but never touched. And I had just slapped it down like it was lunch money. You have money, Loretta whispered, a mix of awe and fury rising in her voice. You have had this kind of money the whole time and you let us struggle, you let your brother suffer. I didn't let anyone suffer, Mom. I said, my voice ice cold. I let you live the consequences of your actions. And now I am saving Dad from the consequences of yours. I turned back to the reception desk as a security guard walked by. Excuse me, officer. The guard stopped looking at me, then at the Centurion card still on the desk, then back to me. Yes, ma'am. These two people. I pointed at Loretta and Marcus. They are not to be allowed near Bernard Wilson's room. They are not to be given updates on his condition. If they try to enter the cardiac wing, I want them removed from the hospital. Loretta let out a strangled cry. You cannot do that. I am his wife. He is my husband. Not anymore, I said. I pulled a folded document from my purse. I carried it everywhere now alongside the evidence of their fraud. It was a medical power of attorney signed by Bernard Wilson 6 months ago during a rare moment of lucidity when I visited him alone. He knew Mom, he knew you were slipping, he knew Marcus was hungry, trusted me. I handed the document to the receptionist. Scan this into his file. I am his designated medical proxy. I am making the healthcare decisions moving forward, and my decision is that his stress levels need to be kept at 0. That means his wife and son are banned from his floor. The receptionist nodded, typing furiously. Mr. Wilson's file has been updated. Security will escort them to the waiting area on the first floor. Loretta lunged for me, her hands clawing, but the security guard stepped in, catching her by the arm. Easy, ma'am, let's go. I watched as they were led away. Loretta screaming that I was an ungrateful child. Marcus looking back at me with a look of pure terror, realizing that his safety net was truly gone. They were escorted out of the emergency room, their voices fading into the hum of the hospital. I took a deep breath, smoothing my sweater. I wasn't just the girl who paid the bills anymore. I was the gatekeeper. I walked through the double doors toward the cardiac wing, the sound of my boots on the floor, steady and sure. When I entered my father's room, he was awake, hooked up to a dozen machines, looking small and frail in the hospital bed. He turned his head as I walked in, his eyes cloudy with pain and confusion. Tiana. He rasped, his voice barely a whisper. Where is your mother? She couldn't be here. Dad, I said, taking his hand. It was cold and dry. I sat in the chair beside him, squeezing his fingers gently. But I am here. I am not going anywhere. I took care of everything. He looked at me. Really. Looked at me. And I saw a tear slide down his temple into his gray hair. You always do, he whispered. You always do. I stayed there holding his hand while the doctors prepped him for surgery. I didn't cry. I didn't break down. I had work to do. My father was safe for now. But the war wasn't over. My family had almost killed him for a taste of the good life. They had crossed the final line. And now that I held the power of attorney, now that I controlled the flow of information and access, I was going to make sure they never got close enough to hurt him again. Phase 4 was about to start, and it involved a lawyer, a judge, and a total dismantling of the Wilson family name. The silence from my family lasted exactly 12 hours. It was the calm before a very calculated storm. They realized they couldn't bully me. They realized they couldn't manipulate me. And most importantly, they realized they couldn't get to my father to force him to sign checks. So they did the only thing people like them know how to do when they lose control of the narrative. They decided to burn my reputation to the ground. It started with a notification on my phone, a tag on Facebook from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. Then another from a deacon at our family church. Then a flood of comments on my professional LinkedIn profile. I opened the app, and there it was. A photo of Loretta sitting at her kitchen table looking frail and destitute wearing a sweater I knew she had bought at Goodwill specifically for this performance. The caption was a masterpiece of fiction. Please pray for our family. My husband is fighting for his life in the hospital, and our daughter Tiana has used her legal connections to ban us from his bedside. She has cut us off financially, leaving us with nothing to pay for his care or our own food. We are heartbroken that money has turned our child against God and family. It went viral locally within hours. The comments were vitriolic. People I had grown up with, people I had tutored in math, people whose small businesses I had helped save pro bono, were calling me a monster. They were calling me ungrateful. They were saying I had forgotten where I came from. Then came Ashley. She didn't stick to Facebook. She went to TikTok. She posted a tearful video sitting in her car, the leather seats carefully cropped out. She spoke in a soft, trembling voice about how she just wanted peace. She claimed I had threatened her unborn child. She claimed I had mocked her for being poor. She painted a picture of a jealous, bitter sister-in-law who used her wealth as a bludgeon to destroy her brother's happiness. I watched the video on my office monitor, my face reflected in the glass, devoid of emotion. Ashley was getting thousands of views. The comments were filled with support. Stay strong, Mama. She sounds toxic. Karma will get her. Karma was indeed coming, but not for me. The real blow, however, didn't happen online. It happened at Greater Hope Baptist Church. This was the seat of power in our community. My parents had been members for 30 years. My father was a deacon. My mother was the head of the hospitality committee. Their social standing was the only currency they had left, and they were spending it all to destroy me. I received a call from Deacon Miller on Tuesday afternoon. He was a man I respected, a man who had given me my first Bible. Sister Tiana. He said, his voice heavy with disappointment. The board of elders had a meeting last night. Your mother came to us. She was in a terrible state. She told us everything. She told you a version of everything, Deacon, I said calmly. She told us you have evicted them. She told us you seized their assets while your father is in a coma. Tiana, the church cannot stand by while you abuse your elders. We are considering revoking your membership. We are considering a public censure. A public censure. In our world, that was social death. It meant being shunned. It meant every door in the community closing in my face. It was a nuclear option, and Loretta had pushed the button without hesitation. I didn't argue. I didn't try to explain that my father wasn't in a coma, he was recovering from surgery paid for by me. I didn't explain that the assets I seized were legally mine. I knew that arguing with a lie that big only makes you look defensive. I understand the board's concern, Deacon, I said. I will respect whatever decision you make. I hung up and turned to my computer. My assistant, Sarah, was standing in the doorway looking pale. Ms. Wilson, our Yelp reviews are tanking, she said. Someone is coordinating a bot attack. They are claiming you defraud the elderly. We are losing clients. 2 consultations canceled this morning. This was it. The cornered animal fighting for its life. They weren't just trying to hurt my feelings anymore. They were trying to destroy my livelihood. They thought that if they broke me professionally, I would have to come crawling back. They thought that if they shamed me enough, I would open the checkbook just to make it stop. They forgot that I am a forensic accountant. I don't operate on feelings, I operate on evidence. Let them talk, Sarah, I said, turning back to my screen. Let them post, let them lie. Do not delete a single comment. Do not respond to a single review. Archive everything. Every tweet, every video, every sermon. I spent the next 3 days in a war room of my own making. I wasn't building a defense, I was building a dossier. I pulled the security footage from my lobby showing Marcus attacking the receptionist. I pulled the audio recording of Ashley trying to blackmail me. I pulled the bank statements showing the transfers to the church's building fund that Loretta had intercepted and spent on a trip to Cabo last year. Yes, I had that too. I had been tracking the money for months, waiting for the right moment. Loretta had been skimming from the church donations she collected. Not a lot, just enough to pay for her manicures and her lunches, but enough to constitute theft. Enough to send a shudder through the board of elders. I printed it all out. I organized it into binders. I created a timeline that was irrefutable. But I wasn't going to release it online. I wasn't going to fight a Twitter war with a woman who had nothing to lose. I was going to deliver the truth in the one place where they couldn't run away. The one place where their lies relied on the silence of the congregation. The annual church gala was Sunday night. It was the biggest social event of the season. The mayor would be there. The bishop would be there. And I knew for a fact that Loretta and Marcus would be there. They would be front and center, playing the role of the grieving faithful family, asking for donations for their poor sick father. I called the event coordinator for the gala, a woman named Beatrice, who had been my client 3 years ago when her business partner tried to steal her catering company. I had saved her business. She owed me. Beatrice, I said, I need a favor. I need 5 minutes on the program. Tiana, honey, you know I love you. But your mother has been telling everyone you are the devil, Beatrice whispered. If I put you on the mic, there might be a riot. I don't need a mic. Beatrice, I said. I need the projector. And I need you to lock the doors for 5 minutes. There was a long silence on the other end. What are you going to do, Tiana? I am going to testify. Beatrice, I said. I am going to give a testimony they will never forget. She agreed. I hung up the phone and looked at the stack of evidence on my desk. They wanted a show. They wanted a villain. I was going to give them exactly what they asked for. But in my version of the story, the villain doesn't get away. I drove to the hospital that night to sit with my father. He was awake, sitting up eating Jell-O. He looked better than he had in years. The color was back in his cheeks. The stress lines around his eyes had softened. They are saying terrible things about you, Tiana, he said, his voice raspy but clear. Nurse Jackson showed me her phone. Your mother, she has lost her mind. She is scared, Dad, I said, smoothing his blanket. She knows the ride is over. You have to stop her, Tiana. You have to tell them the truth. I will, Dad, I promised. Sunday. He grabbed my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. Do what you have to do. Do not protect them anymore. They didn't protect you. I kissed his forehead and walked out of the room. I walked past the security guards who nodded at me with respect. I walked out into the cool night air. The city was quiet. The internet was raging with lies about my character. My business was bleeding. My name was being dragged through the mud. But I felt calm. Because I had the receipt. I had the truth. And on Sunday night, under the holy lights of the sanctuary, I was going to burn their house of cards down. And I was going to enjoy watching it fall. Sunday night in Atlanta is not just an evening. It is an event, especially at Greater Hope Baptist Church. The annual gala was the crown jewel of the social calendar, a night where piety met prosperity. The parking lot was a sea of luxury cars, the air thick with expensive perfume, and the quiet rustle of silk and satin. Inside, the fellowship hall transformed into a ballroom with crystal centerpieces and velvet drapes. The who is who of the community gathered to celebrate faith and family. My family was there, of course. They had arrived early, securing a table near the front, the prime real estate reserved for the church's biggest donors. I watched from the balcony, shadows unseen as they made their entrance. It was a masterclass in deception. Loretta wore a floor-length gown of emerald green sequin that shimmered under the lights. It was a dress she had bought 3 years ago for a cruise, but tonight she wore it like armor. Marcus was in a tuxedo that fit a little too tightly around the waist, likely rented or pulled from the back of a closet. Ashley was draped in white silk, looking angelic and fragile, playing the role of the devoted daughter-in-law to perfection. They looked like royalty, but I knew the truth. I knew Marcus had visited a payday loan shark on Friday afternoon, signing over the title to Ashley's Range Rover, which he didn't even own outright, just to get the cash for the VIP table. I knew Loretta was wearing fake diamonds because the real ones were in a pawn shop on Decatur Street. I knew they were starving, not for food, but for validation, for the adoration they felt entitled to. The evening proceeded with the usual pomp. The choir sang hymns that soared to the rafters. The bishop gave a sermon about forgiveness and charity that seemed pointedly directed at the empty seat at the Wilson table. My seat. Then came the awards segment, the part of the night where the church honored its pillars. The bishop took the microphone, his voice booming. Tonight we honor a family that has been a bedrock of this congregation for 30 years. A family that has faced trials and tribulations with grace. A family that, despite personal tragedy, continues to give back. Please welcome Sister Loretta Wilson to accept the Family of the Year award on behalf of the Wilson family. Applause erupted, warm and enthusiastic. Loretta stood up, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. She walked to the stage, leaning slightly on Marcus for support, playing the frail matriarch beautifully. Ashley followed a step behind, head bowed demurely. Loretta took the microphone, her hands trembling just enough to be convincing. "Thank you, Bishop," she said, her voice quavering. "Thank you, family. This award means everything to us, especially now." She paused, looking out at the crowd, letting the silence build. "As many of you know, my husband Bernard is in the hospital, fighting for his life, and while we should be by his side, we are here because we believe in the power of this community. We believe in the power of prayer." Murmurs of amen rippled through the room. "But we are also here with heavy hearts," she continued, her voice gaining strength, "because we are a family under attack, not from the devil outside, but from the devil within." The room went deadly silent. You could hear a pin drop on the carpet. "Our daughter Tiana Loretta," said the name, "like a curse has turned against us. She has used her education, her success, the very blessings we prayed for, to destroy us. She has evicted us from our home. She has cut off her father's medical care. She has abandoned the values we raised her with for the love of money." Gasps echoed through the hall. People turned to each other, whispering. I saw Deacon Miller shaking his head in sorrow. I saw Mrs. Johnson, who had taught me Sunday school, looking horrified. "She has lost her way," Loretta cried, tears streaming down her face, real tears of self-pity. "We ask you tonight, not for money, though God knows we have been left with nothing. We ask you for prayer. Pray for Tiana. Pray that her heart of stone will be turned to flesh. Pray that she remembers the family that loved her before it is too late." Marcus stepped up, putting an arm around her shoulder, looking stoic and noble. Ashley wiped a tear from her cheek. It was a tableau of suffering innocence, a perfect portrait of a family wronged by a greedy, ungrateful child. The bishop stepped forward, placing a hand on Loretta's head. "Let us pray for this family," he boomed. "Let us pray for the return of the prodigal daughter." The entire room bowed their heads, united in judgment, united in their pity for the poor Wilson family. That was my cue. I walked out of the shadows of the balcony and down the grand staircase. My heels on the marble steps were a sharp staccato rhythm that cut through the prayer. I wasn't wearing a gown. I was wearing a white power suit, sharp and tailored, looking like an avenging angel, or perhaps a prosecuting attorney. I didn't rush. I walked with the slow, deliberate pace of someone who owns the building. Someone looked up, then another. A ripple of movement spread through the crowd as heads lifted, eyes widening. Is that her? Someone whispered. It is Tiana. The murmurs grew to a buzz, then a roar. The bishop stopped praying, looking up to see what was causing the disturbance. Loretta opened her eyes following his gaze. She saw me, and for the first time that night her mask slipped. The grief vanished, replaced by pure, unadulterated fear. I walked straight down the center aisle, the crowd parting for me like the Red Sea. I didn't look at them. I looked only at the stage, at the three people standing there in their rented finery. I reached the front of the stage and stopped. I didn't climb the stairs. I didn't need to. I looked up at Loretta, my face calm, my eyes dry. You asked for prayers, Mom, I said, my voice clear and carrying to the back of the silent room. You asked for the truth. Loretta gripped the podium, her knuckles white. Get out! She hissed low enough that only the front row could hear. You are not, too, welcome here. This is a house of God. God knows the truth, Mom, I said, raising my voice slightly, and now so will everyone else. I turned to Beatrice, who was standing in the wings by the audio-visual booth. She looked terrified, but she nodded. She hit a button on her console. The giant projection screen behind the choir loft flickered to life. The image of the smiling Wilson family, the slide that had been up for the award, vanished. It was replaced by a video, grainy but clear, a security camera feed with a timestamp from 3 months ago. It showed the kitchen of my parents' house. Loretta was sitting at the table counting a stack of cash. Marcus was standing next to her holding a prescription bottle. That is $500, Marcus said, his voice booming through the church's surround sound system. That is Dad's heart meds. Mom, if he misses a dose, he could have a stroke. He will be fine. Loretta's voice on the video was dismissive, waving a hand. Just skip a few days. We need this for the deposit. On the Range Rover, Ashley will kill me if she doesn't get that car. But what if he gets sick? Marcus asked, hesitating. Then Tiana will pay for the hospital. Loretta laughed, a cold, hard sound. She always does. She is so desperate for us to love her, she will pay anything. Just take the money, Marcus. We deserve nice things too. The video cut to black. The silence in the hall was absolute. It was a vacuum, a void where the air had been sucked out. No one breathed. No one moved. Loretta stood frozen on stage, her mouth open, her eyes wide with horror. Marcus looked like he was about to vomit. Ashley had taken a step back, distancing herself from them. Even now. I turned back to the crowd, to the faces of the people who had judged me moments ago. You wanted a prodigal daughter, I said, my voice ringing out in the stillness. You wanted to know where the money went. You wanted to know why my father is in the hospital. I pointed at the screen, where the frozen image of Loretta counting cash still lingered. There is. Your answer? I signaled Beatrice again. The screen changed. This time it was a bank statement projected 20 feet high. Highlighted in yellow were transfers, weekly transfers of $200, $500 labeled Church Building Fund. But the destination account wasn't the church. It was an offshore account in the Cayman Islands registered to Marcus Wilson. The crowd gasped. A collective sound of shock and betrayal. Deacon Miller stood up, his face purple. That is the building fund, he shouted, pointing at the screen. That is the money we raised for the new roof. It was, I said, looking at Loretta, who was now shrinking behind the podium. But the roof never got fixed. Did it, Mom? Because the money went to Cabo. The money went to Saks, Fifth Avenue. The money went to maintaining the lie that you are a wealthy, blessed family. Loretta sank to her knees, not in prayer, but in collapse. She covered her face, her shoulders shaking. Lies, she screamed, her voice muffled and hysterical. It is all lies. She doctored it. She is a witch. It is forensic accounting, Mom, I said coldly. And it is admissible in court. I turned to the bishop, who looked like he had seen a ghost. I apologize for interrupting the service. Bishop, I said, smoothing my jacket, but I thought the congregation deserved to know who they were really praying for. I turned and walked away, back up the aisle, back toward the door behind me. Chaos erupted. People were shouting. The bishop was calling for order. Marcus was trying to run, but Deacon Miller and two other ushers blocked his path. Ashley was nowhere to be seen, having slipped away the moment the video started. I didn't look back. I walked out of the church into the cool night air. The gala was over. The image was shattered. Phase 5 was complete. The truth hadn't just set me free. It had burned the house down, and I was the only one with fire insurance. The sanctuary was a powder keg that had just been lit, but the explosion wasn't over yet. The bank statements regarding the building fund were damning, but Loretta was a survivor. She was already scrambling to her feet, her face a mask of righteous indignation, grabbing the microphone from the podium with a desperate clawing grip. "It is a fabrication!" she shrieked, her voice cracking under the strain of the lie. "Someone hacked our accounts. The devil is at work here trying to divide this holy congregation. Do not believe her." The crowd wavered. Confusion rippled through the pews. People wanted to believe her because believing me meant accepting that they had been played for fools for years. Marcus, sensing the hesitation, stepped forward, puffing out his chest, trying to look intimidating despite the sweat beading on his forehead. "Get off the stage, Tiana," he yelled, lunging toward me. "You have done enough damage. You are sick. You need help." I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I simply looked at the bishop, who was standing frozen by the altar, his eyes darting between the hysterical woman at the podium and the cold, calm daughter standing before her bishop. I said, my voice cutting through Marcus's bluster, "I have one more thing to share, and then I will leave forever. But you need to see the character of the people you are honoring tonight. You need to know who is really standing in your pulpit." The bishop looked at me, then at the projection screen that was still glowing with the evidence of the embezzlement. He nodded once. A grave, solemn movement. "Proceed." I tapped my phone again. The screen went black for a heartbeat, and then a waveform appeared indicating an audio file. The speakers crackled, and then Ashley's voice filled the room, crystal clear and dripping with venom. "I do not care about Marcus." The recording played, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "I married him because he promised me a life. He lied. He is a loser, just like you used to be, and if you do not pay up, I am done with him. I never wanted kids anyway, but if this pregnancy gets me a settlement, then I will play the part." Gasps erupted from the front row, where the church elders sat. The women covered their mouths, the men stared at the floor. Ashley, who had been trying to fade into the background near the choir loft, suddenly found herself the center of hundreds of accusing eyes. She froze like a deer in headlights, her face draining of all color. The recording continued, merciless and loud. "If you do not give me that money, I will take the baby away. Marcus will never see his child. Your parents will never see their grandchild. And I will tell everyone it was your fault." I paused the recording. The silence that followed was heavier than the one before. It was the sound of a carefully crafted image shattering into dust. Marcus turned slowly to look at his wife. His mouth hung open, a look of pure betrayal on his face. For the first time, he wasn't looking at me with hatred. He was looking at the woman he had bankrupted our family for. "You said you loved me," Marcus whispered, his voice picked up by the lapel mic he was still wearing. "You said it wasn't about the money." Ashley didn't answer. She just backed away, shaking her head, her eyes darting around the room, looking for an exit that wasn't blocked by the judgmental stares of the congregation. But I wasn't done. The final blow, the one that would ensure Loretta could never show her face in this town again, was queued up and ready. And for those of you wondering why my father, Bernard Wilson, is fighting for his life tonight, I said, my voice dropping an octave deadly, Serious. It isn't just because of stress. And it isn't just because of the missing insurance payments. Watch closely. I hit play. The screen flickered to a grainy black and white video. It was the security feed from my parents' hallway, taken 2 weeks ago. The timestamp was clearly visible in the corner. The video showed Bernard, my father, shuffling down the hall in his pajamas, leaning on a cane. He looked frail, confused. He went into the bathroom and closed the door. A moment later, Marcus appeared in the frame. He looked around, checking to make sure no one was watching. Then he slipped into the master bedroom. The camera angle switched to the bedroom feed. Marcus walked straight to the nightstand. He opened the drawer and pulled out a large orange prescription bottle, my father's heart medication. He poured the pills into his hand, counting them. Then he took a sandwich bag from his pocket and dumped the majority of the pills into it, leaving only a few in the bottle. He put the bottle back and shoved the bag into his pocket. As he turned to leave, he ran into Loretta, who was standing in the doorway watching him. "Did you get enough?" she asked, her voice on the recording, clear and sharp. "Yeah," Marcus replied, patting his pocket. "I can get 200 for these down at the gym. That should cover the bar tab for tonight. Just make sure you leave him a couple," Loretta said, walking past him to the mirror to fix her hair. "We do not want him crashing before the gala. We need him well enough to smile for the photos." The video ended. This time there were no gasps. There was a low, guttural sound of revulsion that swept through the room like a wave. Deacon Miller turned his back on the stage, physically shielding his wife from the sight of the monsters on the podium. The bishop took a step back, crossing himself. Loretta collapsed. It wasn't a performance this time. Her legs simply gave out and she slid down the front of the podium, hitting the floor in a heap of emerald sequins and shame. She didn't scream, she didn't cry, she just stared at the floor, her hands trembling violently, unable to look up, unable to face the sea of people who now knew the depth of her depravity. Marcus stood paralyzed, staring at the blank screen as if hoping it would change, hoping it would show something else. The realization of what he had done, stealing life-saving medicine from his own father to pay for drinks, was crashing down on him. He looked out at the crowd, pleading with his eyes, but he found no mercy there, only disgust. The bishop walked to the podium. He didn't look at Loretta lying at his feet. He reached down and picked up the crystal plaque, the Family of the Year award that had been resting on the stand. He held it for a moment, the light catching the etched glass, and then he handed it to Deacon Miller. "Remove this," he said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage, "and remove them." Security guards moved in, swift and silent. They flanked Marcus, grabbing him by the arms when he tried to pull away. Two deacons helped Loretta to her feet. She was limp like a rag doll, her eyes vacant. She looked at me as they dragged her past, and for a second I saw a flicker of recognition, a realization that the daughter she had thrown away was the only one who had ever told her the truth. "You are banned from this house," the bishop boomed, his voice filling the sanctuary. "You have defiled this altar with your greed and your lies. Go, and may God have mercy on your souls, because this church will not." The crowd parted, not out of respect but out of a desire to avoid contamination. They pulled their skirts back. They turned their heads, refusing to make eye contact as the Wilson family was marched out the center aisle toward the darkness of the parking lot. Ashley had already fled, slipping out the side door the moment the video started, leaving her husband and mother-in-law to face the music alone. I stood on the stage alone now. The screen behind me was black. The room was silent save for the heavy breathing of 1,000 shocked people. I looked at the bishop. He nodded at me, a gesture of profound sorrow and respect. I disconnected my phone and put it in my pocket. I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. The truth had roared louder than any speech I could have given. I walked down the stairs, off the stage, and back up the aisle. The people who had shunned me, who had called me ungrateful and cold, now looked at me with awe and apology. Hands reached out to touch my arm, whispers of, I am so sorry. And we didn't know. Followed me like a wake, I kept walking. I kept head high, eyes forward. I didn't stop until I pushed through the heavy wooden doors and stepped out into the cool night air. The gala was over. The dynasty was dead. And as I stood there listening to the sirens in the distance coming for Marcus, I finally felt the weight lift. The ledger was balanced. The debt was paid, and I was free. The drive back from the church must have been the longest journey of Loretta's life. The silence in the car wasn't peaceful. It was the suffocating quiet of a tomb. Marcus drove with white knuckles, his eyes fixed on the road, refusing to look at the mother who had promised him the world and delivered him into the hands of the prosecutor. Ashley sat in the back seat texting furiously, her thumbs flying across the screen, making arrangements that did not include her husband or her mother-in-law. They arrived at the house in Buckhead, expecting to hide behind the heavy oak doors to regroup and plan their next lie. Instead, they found the driveway filled with trucks. They weren't police cars, and they weren't news vans. They were box trucks, painted with the logo of a liquidation firm, heavily affiliated with T&T Holdings. My team didn't wait for morning. Foreclosure is a 24-hour business when the debt is this toxic and the assets are at risk of flight. I had authorized the emergency preservation order the moment the gala ended. I watched the feed from the dashboard camera of the lead truck. Loretta stumbled out of the car, still wearing her ruined emerald gown, her makeup streaked with tears and sweat. She ran toward the front door where a team of movers was carrying out the Italian sofa. She loved more than her own children. "Stop it!" she screamed, grabbing the arm of a mover. "Put that down. This is my house. You cannot take my things." The site manager, a woman named Brenda who had been working for me for 5 years, stepped forward, holding a clipboard. She didn't shout, she didn't argue, she just held up the writ of possession. "This property has been seized." "Ms. Wilson," Brenda said, her voice calm and authoritative, "we are executing a court order to liquidate all contents to satisfy outstanding judgments against Marcus Wilson and the estate of Bernard Wilson. You have 30 minutes to gather personal essential items, clothes and toiletries only. Anything of value stays." Loretta looked at the house, then at Marcus. "Do something," she pleaded. "Tell them who we are." Marcus didn't move. He leaned against the hood of his car, staring at the movers carrying out his flat-screen television, his gaming console, the expensive liquor collection he hadn't paid for. He looked like a balloon that had lost all its air. The bravado, the arrogance, the swagger. It was all gone, leaving behind a frightened boy in a rented tuxedo. "It is over, Mom," Marcus said, his voice hollow. "Tiana took it all. She wasn't joking. She really took it all." Then the front door banged open and Ashley stormed out, dragging 2 Louis Vuitton suitcases. She wasn't crying, she was furious. She was a woman who realized she had bet on a losing horse, and she was cutting her losses with surgical precision. She walked right past Loretta, pushing her aside with her shoulder. "Ashley, where are you going?" Loretta asked, grabbing her arm. "Help us. We have to call the lawyer." Ashley ripped her arm away, her face twisted in disgust. "Don't touch me, you delusional old woman. There is no lawyer. We don't have money for a lawyer. We don't even have money for a motel room. I am going to my sister's house. But you cannot leave." "Marcus," Loretta cried. "He needs you. We are a family." "Family." Ashley laughed, a harsh barking sound. "You aren't a family. You are a cult. You worship money. You don't have, and you sacrificed your only decent child to feed your ego. Well, I am done playing the victim. I am done pretending your son is anything other than a loser." She turned to Marcus, who was watching her with wet, pathetic eyes. "Ashley, please," he whispered. "Don't do this. I can fix it. I have a meeting next week." "You don't have a meeting, Marcus. You have a court date." Ashley reached into her purse and pulled out her wedding ring. It was a massive diamond or so, she thought. I knew it was a high-quality moissanite because I had seen the receipt Marcus tried to hide 3 years ago. She threw the ring at him. It hit him in the chest and bounced onto the driveway, disappearing into the grass. "Keep it," she spat. "It is probably fake anyway, just like everything else in this house. Just like you. I am filing for an annulment based on fraud. Do not contact me. Do not follow me." She dragged her suitcases to the curb where an Uber was already waiting. She loaded them in, got into the back seat, and didn't look back once as the car drove away into the night. Marcus stood in the driveway staring at the spot where his wife had been. He looked down at the grass, searching for the ring crawling on his hands and knees in his tuxedo, searching for the last scrap of his fantasy. "Get up, Marcus." Loretta hissed, her voice trembling with rage and humiliation. "Get up and stop embarrassing us. We will fix this. We always fix this." Marcus stopped moving. He sat back on his heels in the dirt and looked up at his mother. For the first time in his life, the adoration was gone, replaced by a deep, childish resentment. "Fix it!" he shouted, his voice cracking. "You said you would fix it. You told me to take the money. You told me Tiana would pay. You said she owed us. You said she was weak. I was trying to help you." Loretta screamed back. "I gave you everything. I gave you my life." "You gave me nothing," Marcus yelled, standing up, looming over her. "You made me useless. You told me I was special, so I never had to work. You told me I was a king, so I never learned to be a man. And now look at me. I am 35 years old. I have no wife, I have no home, I have no money, and I am going to jail because I listened to you." He turned and walked away, not toward the house but down the street, walking into the darkness aimlessly, leaving his mother alone in the driveway. Loretta stood there watching him go. Her shoulders slumped. The fight drained out of her. She turned back to the house. The movers were almost done. The living room was empty. The dining room was bare. The paintings were gone. The rugs were rolled up. She walked inside, stepping over the threshold into the echo of her former life. She walked to the center of the living room and sat down on the floor because there were no chairs left. She looked around at the blank walls, the spots where the pictures used to hang, the dust bunnies dancing in the empty space. She had lost the house. She had lost the money. She had lost the status. She had lost the daughter-in-law she prized above all else. And she had lost the son she created in her own image. All she had left was the silence, a heavy, suffocating silence that pressed in on her from every side. She wrapped her arms around herself, rocking back and forth in the empty room, the emerald sequins of her dress scratched against the hardwood floor. A sound like dry leaves skittering on pavement. She realized then with a terrifying clarity that she was the architect of her own ruin. She had built a shrine to her own vanity and sacrificed her children on the altar, and now the temple had collapsed, leaving her buried in the rubble. Outside, the trucks locked their doors and started their engines. Brenda walked to the front door, looking at Loretta sitting on the floor. "Miss Wilson," Brenda said, her voice not unkind but firm. "We are locking up. You cannot stay here. You have to leave." Loretta looked up, her eyes vacant. "Where am I supposed to go?" Brenda checked her clipboard. "I believe there is a shelter on 4th Street, or perhaps you can call your daughter." Loretta flinched at the word daughter. She knew that bridge wasn't just burned, it was nuked. "I have no daughter," she whispered. Brenda nodded slowly, shutting the door. "Then I guess you are on your own." The lock clicked shut. The sound echoed through the empty house, finalizing the disintegration of the Wilson dynasty. Loretta sat in the dark alone with her choices waiting for a dawn that would offer no comfort, only the harsh light of a reality she could no longer escape. The debt was paid, but the cost was everything. 2 weeks after the gala, the reality of their new life had settled onto Loretta and Marcus, like a layer of grime that could not be washed off. They had been evicted from the house in Buckhead 24 hours after the movers left. The locks were changed, the security system was updated, and the property was listed for auction to satisfy the outstanding judgments. The luxury cars were gone, repossessed by lenders who had no patience for Marcus's excuses. The country club memberships were revoked. The church community had closed its ranks, turning their backs on the family that had deceived them for so long. They were pariahs, outcasts in the very city they used to think they owned. They had ended up at the Starlight Motel, a run-down establishment on the outskirts of the city where the sheets were thin and the sirens wailed all night long. It was a fitting purgatory for two people who had spent their lives judging others for being poor. Now they were learning exactly how expensive it was to be broke. They had no credit, no assets, and no friends. Ashley was gone, having fled to her sister's house in Florida the moment the money dried up, leaving Marcus with nothing but a fake wedding ring and a suitcase full of clothes that no longer fit his shrunken existence. I knew they would come. Eventually, desperation has a way of erasing pride, and they were running out of options. It was a Tuesday evening, raining hard, the kind of cold, relentless rain that chills you to the bone. I was in my penthouse reviewing the final paperwork for the foundation I was establishing in my father's name. When the intercom buzzed, I walked over to the video panel on the wall. The camera feed showed the front entrance of my building. Standing in the downpour were two figures huddled together, shivering. Loretta was wearing a coat that looked 2 sizes too big, likely bought from a thrift store. Her hair wet and matted against her head. Marcus stood behind her, his shoulders slumped, his eyes darting around nervously, as if he expected the police to jump out of the bushes. I pressed the talk button, leaning in close. "Tiana, please." Loretta's voice crackled through the speaker, distorted by the static and the rain. "It is Mom. We have nowhere to go. Tiana, they kicked us out of the motel because Marcus couldn't pay the daily rate. We are hungry. We are cold. Please let us in." I watched them on the small screen, a grainy black and white portrait of defeat. A month ago she would have sneered at this building, calling it new money, calling it pretentious. Now she was begging to stand in its lobby. "Tiana, are you there?" Marcus shouted, his voice cracking. "You cannot leave us out here. It is freezing." "Open the door." I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence stretch, letting the cold seep into them a little longer. I wasn't being cruel, I was being careful. I needed to know if there was any fight left in them, any trace of the arrogance that had almost killed my father. I saw Loretta slump against the glass door, her forehead resting on the metal frame, sobbing. "Please," she whispered. "I am sorry. I am so sorry for everything. Just let us warm up. Just for an hour." I pressed the button to unlock the outer vestibule, but kept the inner security door locked. "I am coming down," I said, my voice flat. I took the elevator down the 30 floors, passing in a blur of motion. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. They were toothless wolves, old and tired. I walked across the marble lobby, the night concierge watching me with concern. "Ms. Wilson, do you want me to call the police?" he asked, his hand hovering over the phone. "No, Henry," I said, smoothing my blazer. "It is fine. I will handle this." I walked to the glass doors. The vestibule was small, a glass box that offered shelter from the wind, but not much else. Loretta and Marcus were huddled in the corner, dripping water onto the expensive teal. When they saw me approach, Loretta scrambled to her feet, her eyes lighting up with a desperate, frantic hope. "Tiana," she cried, pressing her hands against the glass. "Thank God. Look at you. You look beautiful. Open the door. Baby, let us in." I swiped my key fob and the door clicked open. I stepped back, allowing them to enter the lobby, but I didn't invite them further. They stood there dripping wet, smelling of rain and stale desperation shivering in the air conditioning. "We knew you wouldn't abandon us," Marcus said, trying to summon a smile that looked more like a grimace. "We knew you still cared about family. We just need a place to crash for a few days, just until I get back on my feet. I have a lead on a job." "You don't have a lead, Marcus," I said, cutting him off. "You are unemployable in this city. Everyone knows what you did. You stole from a church. You stole from your father." We made mistakes, Loretta interjected, stepping in front of him, shielding him. Even now, we know that, Tiana. We have been humbled. Tiana, the Lord has humbled us, but we are your flesh and blood. You cannot let your mother sleep on the street. You have so much room here. We could stay in the guest room. We wouldn't be a bother. I could cook for you. The audacity was breathtaking. Even at rock bottom, she was trying to negotiate, trying to find an angle. She thought she could charm her way back into comfort, that she could trade servitude for security, just like she tried to make me do for years. I didn't come down here to let you in. Mom, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet lobby. I came down here to say goodbye. Her face fell, the hope draining out of her like water from a cracked cup. What? I came down here to make sure you understood that this is the end, I continued. There are no more bailouts. There are no more second chances. You spent my money for 5 years. You spent Dad's money for 2 years. You used up every ounce of goodwill I had. But we are family, she wailed, dropping to her knees on the marble floor. She reached out, trying to grab the hem of my pants, but I stepped back. Family forgives. Tiana. Family helps each other. Family doesn't steal heart medication from a dying man. I said, the anger finally rising hot and sharp in my chest. Family doesn't mock their daughter for working hard while spending her money on handbags. You aren't family, Loretta. You are parasites. Marcus stepped forward, his hands balled into fists. Look, you ungrateful bitch, we raised you. You owe us. Before he could finish the sentence, the elevator chime dinged behind me. The door slid open with a soft whoosh. Marcus froze, looking over my shoulder. Loretta looked up, her eyes widening in shock. Standing in the elevator was my father, Bernard. He was dressed in a warm wool coat, a scarf wrapped around his neck, holding a small suitcase. He looked frail, but he was standing on his own, his eyes clear and focused. He had been staying with me since his discharge, recovering in the peace and quiet of my guest room, eating healthy food, taking his medication on time. Bernard, Loretta whispered, scrambling to get up. Bernard, tell her to let us in. I am your wife. Bernard walked out of the elevator, moving slowly but steadily. He walked past me and stood in front of the woman he had been married to for 35 years. He looked at her wet clothes, her desperate face, and I saw a flicker of sadness in his eyes, but no hesitation. I don't have a wife, he said, his voice raspy but firm. My wife died a long time ago. The woman in front of me is a thief. Bernard, please, she begged, reaching for him. I did it for us. You did it for yourself, he said, stepping back out of her reach. You almost killed me, Loretta, and you tried to destroy our daughter. I am done. I filed the papers this morning. It is over. He turned to me, nodding once I am ready. Tiana, I took his arm, supporting him. There is a car waiting outside, Dad. We are going to the lake house. It is quiet there. The lake house, Marcus stammered. But that is my house. It was never your house, Marcus, I said, guiding. My father toward the side exit away from where they were standing. It belongs to the person who paid for it, and that is me. We walked toward the door, leaving them standing in the middle of the lobby, wet and broken. Loretta started to scream, a high, thin sound of pure despair. But I didn't turn around. I didn't look back at the mother who had rejected me, or the brother who had used me. I have given you 32 years of chances, I said over my shoulder, my voice carrying back to them, one last time. 32 years of trying to be good enough. 32 years of buying your love. The account is closed. The balance is 0. You are on your own. We walked out into the night, the rain still falling, but under the awning where the town car was waiting, it was dry. The driver opened the door and I helped my father inside. He settled into the leather seat, letting out a long sigh of relief. I got in beside him and closed the door, shutting out the sight of my mother pressing her face against the lobby glass, her mouth open in a silent scream. Drive, I told the driver. As the car pulled away, merging into the traffic of the city, I took my father's hand. He squeezed it, looking out the window at the passing lights. We were leaving the wreckage behind. We were leaving the toxicity, the lies, the constant drain on our souls. We were free. And as I watched the city fade in the rearview mirror, I knew that for the first time in my life I wasn't just surviving. I was finally living. 12 months can pass, in the blink of an eye, when you are building something real. My life had transformed from a series of battles into a landscape of quiet victories. The penthouse was no longer just a fortress. It was a home filled with the sound of my father's laughter and the smell of Sunday dinners that didn't come with a side of criticism. Bernard Wilson had flourished under my care, away from the stress and the constant demands of Loretta. He had regained 20 pounds. His heart condition was managed, and he had even started a small garden on the terrace growing tomatoes and herbs with a patience I had never seen before. TNT Holdings had expanded beyond my wildest dreams. The publicity from the church gala, while initially scandalous, had turned into a beacon. Women from all over the city, women who had been financially abused by husbands, fathers, and brothers started reaching out. They didn't just need an accountant, they needed a lifeline. I hired 3 new associates, all women, all survivors, to handle the caseload. We weren't just recovering assets, we were recovering lives. We were teaching financial literacy, setting up independent trusts, and ensuring that no woman who walked through our doors would ever have to beg for her own money again. I sat in my corner office looking out at the Atlanta skyline. The city looked different now. It looked like opportunity, not a cage. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a notification from a local news site. I had set up alerts for certain names just to keep track. The headline read, "Local man arrested for altercation at car wash." I clicked the link. The mugshot was grainy, but unmistakable. It was Marcus. He looked older, harder. His eyes were dull, stripped of the arrogance that had once defined him. The article detailed a dispute with a customer over a tip. Marcus was working at a full-service car wash on the south side, scrubbing rims and vacuuming floor mats for minimum wage plus tips. It was the kind of job he used to mock the kind of work he said was beneath a Wilson. Now it was the only work he could get with a fraud conviction on his record and a reputation that was toxic in every business circle in the state. He lived in an efficiency apartment near the airport, a place where the walls were thin and the future was bleak. Ashley had divorced him 6 months ago, taking what little was left and disappearing into the ether. He was alone, humbled by the very life he had tried to avoid. I closed the browser tab, feeling nothing. Not pity, not joy, just a quiet acknowledgement of balance. The scales had tipped, and gravity had done the rest. Loretta's fate was quieter, but perhaps more haunting. She was living in a state-subsidized senior housing complex, a small beige building that smelled of industrial cleaner and regret. Her Social Security check, which was all she had left, barely covered her expenses. She had no car, no jewelry, no emerald gowns. The church community she had prized so highly had moved on, replacing her with new pillars, new families to honor. She was a ghost in her own life. I heard from a cousin that she kept a copy of Forbes magazine on her coffee table. The issue where I was featured as one of the top financial minds in the Southeast. She would show it to the nurses, to her neighbors, pointing at my picture and saying, "That is my daughter. She learned everything from me." They would nod politely, not knowing the truth, not knowing that she was the obstacle, not the teacher. She lived in a prison of her own making, rewriting history to comfort herself while staring at the success she had tried to destroy. I stood up and walked to the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon. It was New Year's Eve again, the anniversary of the dinner that started it all. But tonight, there would be no insults. There would be no dry roast. There would be no humiliation. I left the office early, driving the Porsche. I no longer felt the need to hide. When I arrived at the penthouse, the air was filled with music, jazz, soft and soulful. playing from the speakers. My father was in the kitchen supervising the caterers, tasting a sauce with a critical but happy expression. "Tiana," he said, his face lighting up. "You are home early." I kissed his cheek, smelling the familiar scent of his cologne, Old Spice and peppermint. "I wouldn't miss tonight, Dad." The guests began to arrive at 8 o'clock. Beatrice came first, bringing a tray of her famous crab cakes, her catering business booming, thanks to the referral network I had set up for her. Then came Sarah, my assistant, now a junior, a partner glowing with confidence. Then the women from the support group, the clients whose lives I had helped rebuild. They came dressed in sequins and silk, not to show off but to celebrate. We gathered on the terrace as midnight approached the city, holding its breath for the new year. Waiters passed around champagne, real champagne paid for with honest money, earned through hard work and integrity. I stood at the railing, looking out at the fireworks starting to bloom in the distance. Beatrice came up beside me, clinking her glass against mine. "A long way from the church basement," she said, smiling. "A long way," I agreed. My father walked over holding a glass of sparkling cider. He put his arm around my shoulders, leaning his weight against me, a weight I was proud to carry. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. I looked around at the faces surrounding me. There was no blood connection with most of them, but there was loyalty, there was respect, there was love. The kind that doesn't ask for a credit card number. The kind that shows up when you are broken and stays until you are whole. "To new beginnings," I repeated, my voice strong and clear. I took a sip of the champagne. The bubbles were crisp and cold. I thought of Marcus scrubbing wheels in the cold. I thought of Loretta sitting alone in her beige room. And then I let them go. I let them fade into the background of the past where they belonged. The fireworks exploded overhead, painting the sky in gold and violet. I smiled, feeling the warmth of the heater and the warmth of my chosen family. The empire I had built wasn't just made of money. It was made of peace. It was made of justice. And as the clock struck 12, I knew that this time, no one was going to tell me to leave. This time, I was exactly where I was meant to be, sitting at the head of my own table surrounded by the truth. If you have ever had to burn a bridge to find your peace, hit that like button. If you have ever built a castle from the stones they threw at you, subscribe. Share your story in the comments below, because you never know who needs to hear that survival is possible. Happy New Year from TNT Holdings. May your assets be secure, your debts be paid, and your family be the one that treats you like gold. The most profound lesson from Tiana's journey is that you cannot buy respect from people committed to using you. For years, she tried to purchase her family's love with silence and financial support, only to realize that true peace required cutting the cord. The story teaches us that family is defined by loyalty and behavior, not just biology. Setting firm boundaries isn't an act of cruelty. It is a necessary act of self-preservation. Ultimately, your worth is intrinsic, and you must be willing to walk away from anyone, even your mother, who treats you as an option rather than a priority. If you have ever had to choose your own peace over a toxic family relationship, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of resilience and justice.